Hi everyone, Internet PCS book reader here. Today I want to talk about 10 myths about Israel by Ilan Pappe. Islamophobia is one of the most documented propaganda that is easily witnessed on a global level, and it resulted in many human-caused disasters. There's the Myanmar Rohingya genocide that started since 2016 that resulted in an estimated death of 25,000 to 43,000, and as usual witnessing the rape of thousands of people, mostly women and girls. There's the Xinjiang internment camp in China that despite the name of the camp, it is one of the largest imprisonment of the Uyghurs where genocide and rape also happens. There's the many Western interference like CIA Operation Cyclone that damaged the Middle East so much that its effect is still felt even now. Then there's of course the UK Balfour Declaration that helped empower the Zionist Federation rise to power in Israel that will eventually cause the current Palestine genocide that at the moment of making this video, 15 January 2025, has caused the estimated death of possibly double or more than 46,707 people, including 18,000 children. People who do all of these events are per usual are trying to justify it using any excuse, any lies that eventually become their propaganda tool to execute the most heinous crimes ever. One of these tools are Islamophobia. For most people, it's obvious what these people are doing, but still there are individuals out there like Ethan Klein from H3 Podcast, who have almost 6 million subscribers just from one of his channel alone, that is still peddling these lies over and over again and wrongfully calls the pro-Palestine movement as anti-Semitic. Now, I am no Arab and I am no Muslim. I'm an Indonesian Chinese who has experienced racism in Indonesia, but I did not fall to this idiotic Islamophobia-based propaganda, and neither did Ilan Pappe, the author of this book. He is an Israel historian, he is no Arab, and he is no Muslim. He is a Jew who is born in Haifa, Israel in 1954. He has worked as a historian his whole life, even becoming a professor in University of Haifa in Israel, and later on as a professor in University of Exeter in UK. His thesis upon graduation focused a lot of the British interference in Middle East that has damaged the Middle East and made it vulnerable to later interference by other countries like the United States, Russia, China, and even his own neighbor Saudi Arabia. And since then, he has continued to write on the ongoing tragedy in Middle East and in Palestine. But what I want to focus today is this book, The 10 Myths About Israel that people like Ethan Klein and many internet debate bros still unironically serve their millions of followers unchecked. A book that unfortunately becomes more and more relevant in the wake of Hamas attack during October 7 that resulted into 100 people dead with 300 among them IDF members. Israel has gone back a lot to trying to paint anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism, so the book that in its essence is trying to give historical context to clarify the misunderstanding of what actually happened is necessary. The first myth that the book tackles is how Palestine was an empty land, which is not true. During the Roman Empire, there is evidence that Palestine name was given by the Roman as Palestina, and when it exchanged hands to be under the Ottoman Empire for 400 years, starting at 1517, Palestine has been occupied by mostly Sunni Muslim with 10 to 15% among them Christian and 5% among them Jews. But if you go to our Israel Foreign Ministry website, it will try to paint Palestine as originally a land that had gone through desertification, but the Jews then came and fixed the desertification and made them rich and fertile, which, if you know about desertification, is an odd thing to say, and it is indeed odd because it's not true. Israel scholars like David Grossman, Amnon Cohen, and Yehoshua Ben Arieh had tried to debunk this narrative countless times because Palestine was not a desert, it was a thriving Arab society with vibrant urban centers. It had a rich agricultural background, and under leaders like Dahr al-Umar, Palestine thrived, even having trading connection between Middle East and Europe. It is under his leadership in 1690 to 1775 that Haifa, among many others, was rebuilt into a successful port city. It was part of the Bilad al-Sham, or City of the North, famous for how great and beautiful the lands are, the opposite of desert. Before the arrival of Zionism, the country reached a unity among themselves. Influenced by American Christian missionaries, it became a place where Muslim, Christianity, and Jews form a tight-knit community with a unifying sense of belonging, and together, they seek an independence as Palestine as its own country, trying to get out from under the Ottoman Empire, and by 1918, Palestine was at their most united as a nation. It was not until British interference as 1923 that divided the border of the nation that gave the opportunity for the Zionist movement to claim the land of Israel, where only Jews had the right to the land and its resources that things start to fall apart. The second myth the book tackles is that the Jews were a people without land. This myth that comes hand in hand with the previous myth was made popular not by Jews, but by Christians from the West that wanted to make their own self-fulfilling prophecy of the Book of Revelation end time. There's many names that contribute to this, and one of the biggest was Francois René Descartes, who influenced Napoleon Bonaparte to ally with the Jews of Palestine because he believed that the Jews were the true master of Judeo, showing that before Palestinian land erasure was a Jewish colonization program, it was a Christian colonization program. Even the American President John Adams had stated that he wished for the Jews again in Judea as an independent nation despite staying in a land that was not his. In England, Lord Shaftesbury even raised Christian Zionism and recruited his father-in-law, Britain Foreign Minister and later Prime Minister Lord Palmerston into Christian Zionism. This early proto-Zionist movement will later band together with the German Temple Pietists that helped the Zionists rise to power in Palestine in the early days until the new Jewish state kicked them out of Palestine. Zionism movement then got further spread because of anti-Jewish persecution in Russia, France, and Germany during late 1870 to early 1880, becoming an internationally recognized movement. Later on, the Zionist movement becomes even more prominent due to the backing of the British Empire, which claimed its Jewish land. But that claim was mostly sourced from the Christian Zionists who used the Bible as their own historical source and later on as an excuse for the Zionist colonialism and Palestine genocide. Before Zionism, most Jewish people did not actually believe that they are people without land. If anything, they were already in so many places that home is wherever they were, not Israel. Then moving on, the third myth is that Zionism is Judaism. If you know your history, you know how absurd this claim is since Zionism was only founded in late 1800, but yet this myth turns so strongly because of two impulses. One is to find safety from being persecuted even if by persecuting others, and the second one comes from the European string of nations. Then a few writers of Zionists who would be dubbed as the harbingers of Zionism started gaining popularity. They were trying to make Judaism not as a religion but as a national movement, and they combined it with colonialism dream of taking back Palestinian land that has been taken from them by the Rome in 17 CE. This movement then gained even more momentum in 1881 because of the lovers of Zion that came from Russia. But Zionism is just one of the many movements that came from Judaism. It is not Judaism. There is the reformists that reject the materialistic approach of Zionism, which later on unfortunately divide themselves into pro-Zionist and anti-Zionist in itself. There is also the liberal Jews or liberal Judaism who understand that Israel claiming Palestinian land is not resolving the issue of anti-Semitism in Europe. There's also the socialist and Orthodox Jews who until 1890 opposed the Zionist movement, but will later conform to Zionism because of Theodor Herzl's work, who understands politics and has written many utopian fiction. There are a few more different schools of Judaism, but a lot of them changed after they got land and home in Israel, and it only got worse after figures called the father of religious Zionism rise to fame. Before Zionism, Judaism did not carry any political or national value in Jewish education both in Europe and in Arab. Herzl, one of the Zionist prophets, even considered the Promised Land to be in other places, Uganda, North and South America, and Azerbaijan. It was only after his death that his successor locked in on Palestine. And at that time, Europe even helped atone with Jews moving to Palestine, not only because of the self-fulfilling prophecy of the return of their Messiah, but also due to anti-Semitic sentiment of wanting a Europe without Jews, which is kinda crazy that Zionism just took it, since if they read the Bible, Israel don't have a good ending in the Bible if this self-fulfilling prophecy is pushed to the end. But unfortunately for the Palestinians, this movement helped with the systematic ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. It gave a better narrative that if more Palestinian land belong to Israel, then the more Christian prophecy is being fulfilled. And it also worked as the justification of the Jew settlers there to keep taking the home, the land, and the life of the native Arab that is already there in Palestine. And eventually, these settlers that are not bound by the law of the land started getting more violent and started taking lands that are not even mentioned in the Bible. Voices that are trying to reason with them, even giant figures like Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela, was considered blasphemous. And with that, we move to the fourth myth, that Zionism is not colonialism. A myth that you had to be in another level of ignorance or delusion if you believe this. Just like when Europeans went to America, Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, and same as them, when the first Jew Zionists arrived, they were surprised that there has been people, citizens, families with their own culture and dream that already occupied the land that they thought was empty. And just like the European, they rely on means of genocide, and they have many ways to justify the killing of the native families. There is of course the dehumanization that rely on racist and Islamophobic way, either one or both of them at the same time. Dehumanizing the native Arab also works to give them less human right to live in their own land. It also saw Israel have an excuse that they didn't kill a lot of them, again reducing them in numbers in ways that is dehumanizing. They then tried to paint Palestinians who defend their own land and their own lives as people who hate Jews, even though diaries and collaboration of the first Jew settler was that they were received with kindness and was even taught how to cultivate their own land in Palestine by the native Arabs. The resistance only began once it is obvious that the settlers did not come in peace. During the initial Zionist movement, joint businesses between Arab and Jews was not rare in there, and that's despite opposition from Zionists who viewed Arab labor as society illness. But because Zionists owned Israel government and its politics, this union did not last long. The politician leader in Israel grew more hostile at these joint businesses and tried to destroy them by any means, despite the businesses being partially owned by Jews. When the British saw that the Palestinians wanted to be independent, they even offered unequal rights among Arab and Jews. But the Zionists steadily refused the offer because they cannot accept joint ownership of the land. Eventually, of course, the Palestinians grew more and more anti-colonialist since their home kept being taken and they were pushed to the slum, and the British and UN did not offer any sympathy outside of a few pats in the back. Israel also then tried to paint Palestinians as Nazi sympathizers because one of their leaders, al-Hushani, when he tried to push back Palestinian anti-colonial movement from violence and push for strike and demonstration that is more peaceful, was painted as an enemy of the state and was exiled. He seeked refuge in France and German and unfortunately was indoctrinated by the Nazis, so later on he cannot separate Jews and Zionists. But he is no different than the Zionists who seek for alliance with the Nazis in 1930 to oppose British. It's also the my enemy of my enemies, my friend decision that every country has done, including Israel. It's not unique to Palestine. And for that, the Zionists put his entry to the history of Holocaust at the second longest after Hitler. In a way, also understanding what Hitler did to the Jews in Europe. But despite the Zionist effort, they are still only a third of the population there. 500,000 of Jews in a state with 2 million population. So the annihilation and dehumanization Zionist project continues to the fifth myth of the book that the Palestinians voluntarily left their homeland in 1948. This myth, which again is stupid if you just think for a bit, why would millions of people willingly empty their house and land then goes on a journey where many will die during this process? Especially when it was done by people whose celebration is a harsh journey. This myth comes because from the start of this plan, the Zionists tried to avoid using the word compulsory. They forced themselves to keep using voluntarily even when it makes no sense in the context of their meetings. The plan started in 1938 but was halted during World War II. But in 1947, the British announced that they are leaving from Palestine, so the Zionists who panicked lied to the Palestinians that they need to move because other Arab leaders of the world are trying to attack Israel. There were no such calls being made, of course, because it is a lie. It's just to trick the Palestinians to escape and then promise that they can return back after the attack was finished, a promise that was never fulfilled. Since again, it's a lie. The attack never happened and the escaping Palestinian was not welcomed back into the city. Even if they wanted to go back, their home was already occupied by the settlers who are not righteous enough to give up their newfound home to its rightful owner. The US under John F. Kennedy tried to exert pressure to Israel so they accepted the Palestinian refugees back into their land and their home by putting sanctions on them. He even tried to pressure the UN to intervene, which caused Israel Prime Minister at the time Ben-Gurion to panic and ask a bunch of Zionist researchers to come up with believable lie that the Palestinians left voluntarily. But in practice, it's about as voluntary as war prisoners voluntarily give information that is being asked of them with torture. And they of course cannot prove that Palestinians voluntarily left their land except for saying it over and over again, because what they did is far worse than just lying about it. During the event of the Nakba in 1948, a total of 531 and 11 urban cities was destroyed. Most of its citizens was killed, raped, and many males over the age of 10 was kidnapped. It is one of the biggest crimes against humanity, but Israel never received any repercussion from it. Also later on in history, Folle Bernadotte, the UN Swedish diplomat who negotiated the release of 31,000 prisoners from the Nazi, was also assassinated by a Zionist terrorist. The group who did it also never received any repercussion. One of the main guys who planned the assassination, Yitzhak Samir, later even became Israel Prime Minister. And because Israel was never punished for this crime, they go on to continue committing war crime. Because what lesson is there to learn if a lesson was never given? If anything, any Israel Jews that tried to voice out their protest was quickly silenced by the Zionists, giving them form of one of the most underspoken anti-Semitism. The Jews who are in direct opposition of Zionism being persecuted. And speaking of war crime, the sixth myth is the June 1987 war was a war of no choice. This is another lie and another excuse for Israel to take over the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, taking them in custody until the Palestinian leaders are more reasonable. And since 1948, they have actually made some plans to get that land into their hand. Yes, multiple plans. But they are afraid of how it will be perceived internationally since they no longer have a Hitler to blame for them doing more war crimes. But they cannot hold their greedy power any longer, and finally in 1967, Israel strike. Since there is no Hitler to blame now, what Israel did this time was blame the Palestinians that already have so much taken from them. With that excuse, Israel kept pushing Syria in a series of military moves that are aimed to provoke them to attack. Kinda like what North Korea, but much more scummier. They then attacked Jordan Air Force and asked them politely not to retaliate despite having just attacked their Air Force. Unfortunately, after decades of very successful indoctrination, Israel army has grown much larger and are able to attack Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. And with this force and decades of planning, they managed to occupy West Bank and Gaza. International world pressured Israel to stop, but they've learned from 1948 that the war will not stop them despite all their talk, and thus the Zionist dream of taking Palestine is done. They didn't kill all the Palestinians, not out of goodwill, it's because they're afraid of actual opposition against this. But what is left of the Palestinians is basically in a state of limbo with as much human right as a prisoner, a reality that is still the reality they live now in 2025. Almost a century after the Nakba, and any opposition inside the prison camp will be dealt with the most brutal violence, a genocide or two if it's needed. And with that, we move to the seventh myth, that Israel is the only democracy country in Middle East. This is a myth that many of Israel defenders took because Israel have many Democrat allies, even though ever since its initial development under British protection, it used draconian military rule that denied Palestinians their human rights. Even Israel local government live as an absolute rulers who can devise special laws for the Palestinians, destroy their house, send them to jail, destroy their lives, and they can do this whenever they want without needing any excuse or any reason to do so. It was not until 1950s when there were strong Jewish opposition to this that it stopped. But it got worse after pre-war Israel. This time it's not even local government, but the lowest ranking of IDF soldier can destroy life and take homes on a whim. They can demolish family houses, hold people for hours at checkpoint while pregnant mother was forced to give birth while they're in line, or put them in prison without any trial. And this was not isolated to only individuals. A lot of times this happened to large community. Entire villages are often ordered to leave so their land and homes can be occupied by other Jews. Anyone who dared speak of this on the Palestinian communities are of course punished in the worst way possible. So often we got this information by piecing points by Palestinians that omitted places and names. This is all just because Zionists wanted to take more land but did not want an increase in Palestine population. So often once they colonize more lands, they got rid of the Palestinians who are already on those lands, and this often leads to further massacre. How did a government who are more freely trigger happy than the notoriously gun-toting country that is America democratic? It even had a law where it allowed all Jews, whether they're from Israel or not, to get automatic citizen in Israel, but then reject the return of the Palestinian from Nakba and pushes other races like Palestinians in West Bank and Gaza to the slums and to their death. What is democratic about openly treating Jews as a superior race in Israel? This can also be seen through the oppression of the Palestinians that was pushed in the slum of Israel. They were not given equal rights to the Jews. They are not given equal job opportunity, especially once borders are put to hold them for hours on end. They really made America look like a country that treated non-white people equally with white people. Palestinians are not given equal funding by the government. They are not given equal rights. I mean, they have house demolition as punishment to Palestinian family when one of the family members did the smallest infraction like a kid bumping them or looking at them funny, or they saw a girl they really like. Again, this makes police brutality in America a joke. This is not how democracy works. And as if that's not enough, the Israel government also allowed the settlers to create vigilante gangs to harass the Palestinians, from ruining their plants and homes to randomly shooting at them with real guns and real bullets aimed at men, women, and children. This gang has existed legally since 1980. One of them is the terrorist group that assassinated Volker Bernadotte, and if they can kill a UN diplomat and get no punishment for it, obviously the Palestinians who live there have it much worse. You can describe Israel as an ethnocracy state that prefers one race over others, and you can even legally describe Israel as an apartheid state, but in practice and in the writing of their law, it is by no means a democracy. And with that, we move to the eighth myth, the Oslo mythologies, which of course talking about the Nobel-winning Oslo Accords, where for the first time in 1992, Israel is finally willing to have direct negotiation with the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. This is because of PLO rising power in Palestine and also because of Madrid Peace Initiative. But from the start, they have been planning to nip the Madrid Initiative from the very beginning. This accord is their attempt at making their own move so they can control the negotiation. There are two main myths in these methodologies. One is that this is a genuine peace process, and two is that Yasser Arafat intentionally undermined it by instigating the Second Intifada. Remember that Israel is the one controlling the negotiation from the start, and from the start they already tried to cut off Palestinian right of autonomy, especially in economic and foreign policy. Also, Palestinian right to return is fully excluded from the negotiation table. The Oslo process even includes further partition of the Palestinian native from the settler. It is still treating them as a defeated colonist race of inferior, which of course are unacceptable. Netanyahu is involved in the accord, then blamed the Oslo Accord failure to the Second Intifada that happened because of the absurdity of what the program asked for. And again, it is a lie. The program comes to a stop because of the assassination of Israel Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin that is done by a right-winger Jew after months of Netanyahu trying to openly incite the murder of Yitzhak Rabin. Then the ninth Prime Minister from the Likud party headed by Netanyahu killed the negotiation. The accord is still established, but its content and its legitimacy was written by Israel and America with no input from the Palestinians. Hundreds of thousands of them are still refugees without any human rights whatsoever. The Oslo Accord then was used once more as an excuse that Israel has tried to negotiate peace, especially after Netanyahu became the prime minister in 1996, when in practice, from the start, they have no intention to give anything to the Palestinians. After that, using the accord, they only take more. They divided West Bank into Area A, B, and C, separating them with borders from their own neighbors and from the Gaza Strip, and they divided the Gaza Strip into two, with the Palestinian part having no access to the electricity and water that are located in the Israeli settler part. And as per usual, any Palestinian with enough fame and power to negotiate peace through foreign means like Yasser Arafat and the poet Ghassan Kanafi was assassinated, and with the rise of Netanyahu to power, more and more military attacks to Palestinian citizens become more normalized, using airplane bombing in crowded civilian buildings like hospital and school, something that can still be seen in the latest Gaza genocide. And with that said, we move to the ninth myth. The Gaza mythologies, probably one of the most often attacked places in the world, with the attack of 2006, 2014, and the most recent one. Just as a few examples, there are three myths regarding the attack on Gaza. The first myth is the usual Hamas blaming, a group that resurfaced in 1980 and gained more popularity after its competitor Fatah failed the Oslo Accord, and then the vacuum created by the assassination of Yasser Arafat. Because they are not the perfect victim, Hamas has been painted internationally as a terrorist group when it is in fact a legitimate liberation movement with about 60 years of history from being an activist group to its current state, only growing to become an armed movement after Israel turns more violent with their IDF and vigilante gang. The second myth is a lie that is spread by Israel themselves that their decision to assassinate Yasser Arafat and causing the downfall of the Fatah group that created the opportunity for Hamas to rise was a peace attempt made by violence, which if you follow the video so far, it sounds absurd even by Israeli standard, especially after they turned West Bank and Gaza into an Orwellian nightmare. The third myth is that their continuous military attack since 2006 to Gaza is a self-defense against terror, which if you've seen IDF ex-members that joined in for fun or because they're bored with life and wanted some excitement like Ethan Klein's wife Hila Klein, you can see how absurd this lie is since a lot of IDF members are just walking around peacocking in citizen area terrorizing the civilians there. All three of these myths have their own flavor of Islamophobia that is trying to paint Hamas as a fanatical Muslim instead of people who are pushed to the extreme by almost a century of occupation and oppression that only grew more violent. Instead of a response of what Israel did to them, the narrative is turned into Israel as the good guy trying to defend themselves against the evil that is Islam. And these are said unironically by people who have assassinated their Jewish political competitor to get into their seat of power. Remember that peaceful protest by Palestinians has been done and met with violence by the IDF and their vigilante gangs. If Hamas is labeled as terrorist, that is because Israel is a cartoon villain in real life that is incomprehensibly evil. Remember that Gaza Strip is only 2% of the landmass in Palestine. Remember that Israel never withdrew from Gaza, claiming the area with electricity and water and barring the Palestinian entry to them. Remember the ethnic cleansing that the Palestinians has suffered decades before Hamas was a thing. Remember the assassination that Israel did on top of all the killings. Remember all the brutal campaign that Israel has done that each killed hundreds to thousands of Palestinian civilians. The Nakba, the defensive shield, the first rain, summer rain, autumn cloud, hot winter, gaslit, returning echo, pillar of defense, protective edge, and many others. None of these operations was made to defend itself, and all of them have civilians target. Sometimes the target are even only the civilians. Israel is not defending themselves, they are attacking, ethnic cleansing the Palestinians. And with that, we go to the 10th myth and last myth of the book, that the two-state solution is the only way forward. This myth is a very optimistic view of the resolution to Israel-Palestinian conflict, but with the current state of Gaza and West Bank, with the wall and partition literally gatekeeping the Palestinians from natural resources, education, and work, there is no hope for Palestinians to survive in the current Israel. They also still deny the return of Palestinian refugees who was forced out of their land and home by the Nakba and further operations. If anything, the two-state solution only helped Israel from being able to paint themselves as a peace-loving nation instead of the warmongering apartheid mega prison for the Palestinians. If there's any solution for Israel-Palestine conflict, it can only be achieved once the world recognizes Israel for their war crime and then dismantle the system that enables them to harm the Palestinians without any punishment, allow the Palestinians to return back to their land and give them back their full human rights. And that is the book 10 Myths About Israel by Ilan Pappe. It debunks these myths and more by going through a clear timeline of the events that created the current state of Israel and Palestine, and going through many declassified documents from not only Israel but UK, America, and more. It managed to fully display and highlight the more than a century of colonialism movement that the Zionists, that is now both the left party and the right party of Israel political parties, has done. I highly recommend you read the book yourself. Don't be like Ethan Klein and others like him who thinks that his own limited experience and reading through social media means he is educated enough in the topic. This is a small book that is very dense with information and have no excess fat in its writing. I give this an easy 5. What do you think? Let me know if I missed anything, so leave your thoughts in the comment below and subscribe to the channel. That's about it. See ya.